to Booked All Night. This is very exciting. I get to introduce Joanne Harris as our guest and our final guest for the
Woo!
season. Woo! Joanne Harris is the author of literally everything because you've written like 50 plus titles I saw on your, or around 50
Is it
on.
that many? I don't think it's that many. I've certainly written at least 20 novels. I'm not sure if I've quite got to 50 yet, although I can always aim for something, right?
Yeah. Well, we're going to say 50 because it's still a lot that you wrote 20. And you've got cookbooks in there and a book for an opera I saw.
This is certainly true, yes.
Yes. Oh my. Like, my mind was blown. I was like, I can't believe you have written so much. That is so much. I'm a little
I've
overwhelmed.
been around for a while. I've been writing for a long time, and much of it went unread for many years. But now I'm trying to catch up on that.
Well, anywho, today we are talking about Vianne, which is the prequel to the Chocolat series. So just give our listeners, our viewers, just a little quick pitch to get us started.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. If you haven't read Chocolat, that's not a problem because the great thing about writing a prequel to a book is that you can start there. It can be your gateway drug. And if you like Vianne, then you may be interested in what happens to her later. And if not, no foul, you might want something else. So this is basically the story of Vianne Rocher 6 years before Chocolat starts. And it starts with the arrival of a young woman who basically steps off the plane from New York, having scattered her mother's ashes in the Hudson River. She arrives in the coastal town of Marseille in France with no money, no connections, no real skills, and she's only 21. And guess what? She's also pregnant. So she has choices, but also a lot of anxieties. And this is a Vianne Rocher who knows nothing about chocolate. She can't cook. She has never had a permanent home of any kind. But for the sake of this child, who she really doesn't want to have the kind of life that she has had, she would like to settle down, acquire skills, make money, make a life. But every choice she makes comes with a price, and in her case, it might be very high.
I mean, isn't that true? Every choice, every single choice comes with some sort of price.
Absolutely. And this book is all about choices, in fact, and all about the changing winds and where they can lead us. And Vianne is, um, whatever you want to call her, really, she is a sort of witch. Her mother was a witch. She brought her up with certain talents that she has naturally and certain skills which she has acquired within this. She is able to see and to a certain degree manipulate the thoughts and feelings of people around her. Um, but she doesn't want to interfere. She actually ends up interfering quite a lot, but this is part of the journey that she's on.
If there is one thing I know about myself and about characters that are like, I don't want to interfere, we are going to interfere the most.
So much.
So much. So we play lots of games here at the podcast. They get us laughing and talking and giggling and all that good fun stuff. So the first game is a game of superlatives where I'm just going to give you, like most likely to XYZ, and you just tell us which character you think is fitting the most for that.
Okay,
Just
characters
before
in this book, right?
Yeah, just in this book or any book that you have written if you so wish to enjoy your entire catalog. And Katie, did you say something?
Yes, before we jump into the games, I would actually like to ask a question about
How
Vianne.
ridiculous.
I
A
know,
question.
on a book podcast.
During
Oh
an
my gosh.
interview. Absolutely.
Please ask questions.
And I don't want to date you or the book, but Chocolat was written, I believe, in 1995, if I'm correct, or published.
It was published in 1999. I know what your
99.
question is
Okay.
going to be because this is a very frequent question, and it is the fault of Hollywood. Now, the movie was clearly not set in the late
Ah,
90s. It really
yes.
wasn't. Clearly, they obviously made a decision over the top of my head, because who listens to an author, that they wanted to have 50s costumes. And so they set the whole thing in this sort of late 50s. But a lot of people have said to me, well, look, if you set Chocolat in the 50s, how come this book is set in the late 90s? It's because I actually set the book in the present day. Um, and and Hollywood changed it around a bit. I think because they just liked the frocks.
Hmm.
That actually was not the question I was going to ask.
Well, I'm glad,
But
I'm glad you asked it anyway, even though you didn't ask it.
But I did see the movie in French class when I was a teen. I forgot almost everything about it except that Johnny Depp was in it.
He was.
I recently started reading the book. I'm about 180 pages in. Um, and I just wanted to know, how hard was it for you to return to Vianne and write a book that is before Chocolat? Because it has been some years. Did you have to revisit your series, or is that something that you've, like everything that you've written, you've just retained because you love the characters so much and they speak to you? Or what was your process for returning to this world and doing a prequel?
It's a really interesting question. It's one that I should have asked myself when I was planning writing the book, because it turned out to be a whole lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And one of the things that really helped me was recording the audiobook of Chocolat a couple of years before I wrote this book. And that got me back into a previous voice, because, of course, I have traveled with Vianne Rocher for over 25 years. She and I have gone through a number of adventures in motherhood and a number of character developments together. And so inevitably, the voice has changed a little. And I left her, with The Strawberry Thief as the mother of two children, one of whom has already left home, the other is preparing to leave home. And so she and I have aged at more or less the same speed, or I think she's aged rather better than I have. But to try to go back not only to that previous voice when I first wrote Chocolat, but actually to 6 years before that, to a 21-year-old who doesn't know what it's like to be a mother, who hasn't learned any of the things that she's learned or she's going to learn on this long journey. So I basically went back to Chocolat and I thought, okay, this is where I need to start, and then I need to move backwards and rewind some of those events and some of those learning experiences and that adventure in motherhood. And I need to go back to effectively the 21-year-old I was, clueless, a bit abrasive, with few social skills, with few skills of any sort, actually, and try to build her from as much as I could remember of that voice. Now, one of my secret weapons when I'm writing is scent. I have always
Mm.
allocated a scent to every book that I've written. And with the Vianne books, I've been using various Chanel scents, which all have the same basis, but which have sort of character developments over the top of that. And so I was using number 5 when I wrote Vianne. So I went back to number 5 and went to a slightly different Chanel scent called Coromandel, which is even more set in the late 80s and early 90s. So I kind of used that scent to get back to the age that I wanted to access when I wanted to be as close to Vianne as possible. So I kind of did that, but I deliberately sort of had to keep telling myself, no, she can't do that. She doesn't know how to do that yet. She can't think that. She hasn't had the experience that will teach her that thinking that is the way to go. So she makes a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
I like that. I wish scent work worked for me. I'd
Yeah.
actually I'd seen before uh, some writers were using a specific scent of candle to kind of put themselves in the mood to be like, okay, well the cinnamon apple cinnamon candle is burning, and so now we're going to get into the headspace to write. And
Yeah.
my headspace was, hmm, what do I have in the house that I could eat that tastes like this candle? Just
Yeah.
did not quite work for me.
Yes, wanting to make French toast is
Yes.
not a writing trigger. And I found this because when I actually gave up teaching, when Chocolat made it, and I was able to give up my day job, I spent a whole year basically not writing and just making toast, and thinking, when is somebody going to tell me what to do next? So I get that completely. I think that the scent thing I learned from Stanislavski, it's there in An Actor Prepares.
Hmm.
Actually, everything in An Actor Prepares is portable, and applicable to being a writer. But if scent doesn't work for you, and it doesn't always, I mean, not everybody is primarily driven to notice the world through scent. I mean, I happen to be, because I've got synesthesia and
Hmm.
I smell everything, including colors. But in my little book, 10 Things About Writing, I also talked about kinetic triggers and oral triggers and other kinds of trigger that people can use, because not everybody is going to necessarily gravitate to the emotional pull of scent, but there may be something else that they do.
I think a main problem for myself, to get personal, as I get personal in every podcast. But I have ADHD, and so when I find something that works, it works for a little bit of time, and then my body is like, okay, well, now I know how the magic works, and I don't want to do it anymore, and I have to be like, okay, now I'm gonna spend a month figuring something else out. Fine, that's cool. But I've done that. I've done stretches before. I've done playlists before. I've done
Mm.
affirmations before. Like I've tried a lot of things, and it's just like at the end of the day, my body needs to just sit down and do it, which is so oversimplifying the act
Mhm.
of doing it, but is also incredibly true. At the end of the day, you do need to sit down and do it. And like I had we'd interviewed VE Schwab for a previous project at one point, and I
Yeah,
had
they're
asked,
great.
yeah, I had asked her, I was like, what do you do to like romance yourself into getting into the writing mood? And she's like, I have a cup of tea and that's it, because everything else is an excuse to not get my writing done. So like if I don't have the right candle, if I don't have the right playlist, if I it's not the right temperature, if it my desk isn't set up the right way, it's all just a okay, well, I can't do it right now, as
Mm.
opposed to just I have my tea, my laptop is open, and that's what I need. It doesn't matter where it is. And I'm like, I wish I had the discipline, but I do not. So,
I
yeah.
I mean, I think Jess and I discussed this before where I have undiagnosed ADHD, and so I need a very quiet and I can't have any music on. I can't have the TV on. Like my phone needs to be very far away from me, even though I have the laptop open and could easily access the internet. It's just
Mm.
um, if my phone is away from me, I can write a little bit better. And then I also learned that even if I have that in the living room, I still can't write. Like I have to be in the bedroom on my bed writing. It's
I
just,
can't be home.
I guess, a safe space.
Home home is the worst place to be because all the distractions are here. The TV is here, the good internet is here, the craft room is here. Like no, home is
Yeah.
the worst place to write. I
It is
gotta
actually the
gotta
worst
go.
place. Yes, this is this. I discovered this some years ago, and my husband built me a shed at the bottom of the garden, which is just far enough away for people to think twice about coming to bother me there, and just muddy enough in winter for it to be off-putting. And there's very little internet, so I can't really count on it being like that. And this is where I go. This is where I work when I'm at home, which is about
Mhm.
a tenth of the time, but it's a good space, and I'm very lucky to
Hmm.
have it.
I want a writing shed.
Yeah.
Remind me when I'm done to bug my husband so he gets me a writing shed for the backyard.
Well, for a
Robert,
long
build
time,
us
my
a
shed was
writing
an
shed.
imaginary place.
Yeah.
I had to imagine my shed because I didn't actually have the space or the means to have a shed, and so I just sat on the floor and pretended that I had a shed. And sometimes, there's pretend spaces and liminal spaces can be as important as real spaces because it's really all about the headspace, right?
Yes.
And achieving the headspace is the important thing
Hmm.
to do. So yes, if you have to do half an hour of yoga before starting, I mean, I pity you, but by all means, if that's your way of getting into it. But with me, it's so much easier because scent is immediate,
Mhm.
and to me, it's a very quick entryway into that place. And of course, it's portable, which means that I can use it on trains and in hotel rooms and in all the places that I write when I'm not at home in my shed.
With that said, I'm gonna play this game that Katie didn't let me play.
Cool.
I'm sorry. I had a legit question.
That's fine. So it is
Those
superlatives.
don't happen often.
They happen. It's fine.
Not with me.
So the game is called superlatives. I just have five options, and you're just gonna get, most likely, most blah 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 to whatever. And just for the sake of speed, we'll say the characters from Vianne. So
Cool.
the very first one is most likely to stir the pot, either literally or metaphorically.
Oh well, this is definitely Vianne.
Yeah.
um, because she the first job she gets is helping in the kitchen of a small rundown bistro in Marseille. She omits to tell the owner that she can't cook, but she is a fast learner. and she is able to use the recipes that he has inherited from his wife, who's been dead for 20 years. They are very precious recipes. She is not allowed to change them in any way, um, because they are what this man keeps his wife present
Hmm.
by doing. Making her recipes, honoring her memory. He expects Vianne to do this. And he says, well, the first recipe I'll teach you is basically a simple, simple recipe. Anyone can do this. So you should have no problems. Of course, it's fine for anyone who's from Marseille because it's bouillabaisse, which is basically the dish of Marseille. But actually, it's really quite tricky, especially if, like Vianne, you've never cooked a dish before. You don't know the names of any of the spices. You don't know what any of the fish are supposed to look like when you go to the market. She finally passes this test, which to me is the sort of, it's the equivalent of the old grumpy samurai agreeing to teach the young apprentice the tricks of the trade. He's allowed to look at the sword but not hold it. Vianne is allowed to hold the wooden spoon, but that's all she's allowed to touch in the kitchen until she can be trusted. She finally gets some knowledge, but she also stirs the pot because she starts making her changes, and they create ripples all around her in the community.
Love it. Number two is most dramatic flair for the Gothic.
Oh well, this has got to be uh, this is the owner of the bistro. He's probably not aware of his dramatic flair for the Gothic, but he is definitely Gothic at heart. He's a poet at heart. He's a grumpy old man in all appearances, and he's surrounded by his friends who are also mostly grumpy old men like him. He cooks for them, he talks to them, um, but secretly he is a romantic. He has lost his wife. She is still there, in essence, around him in everything he does, and she has been buried in the cheap part of Marseille Cemetery, a place which is basically a concrete, a kind of concrete edifice with 300,000 um, corpses in there, and he just refuses to visit her there. Instead, he goes to the tomb of Edmond Rostand, who was her favorite poet, and he reads her poetry aloud there. And he leaves a single rose every Sunday when he goes. So, this, I think, is possibly the most Gothic an old man can ever become. Um, and I love the way that that comes out about him, because initially he's not a very sympathetic character, but you get to the heart of why he is the way he is and why he does the things he does.
I love that. Most likely to write passive aggressive letters.
Hmm. In that case, I would think this is the father of a character called Guy Lacarrière, who is a chocolatier. He is Guy is a man who comes from a family of lawyers. His father was a lawyer. His sister is a lawyer. He was expected to be a lawyer. He started his legal studies and then changed direction and became a chef. He has not yet told his family. He has an uneasy correspondence with his father, and I'm pretty sure that his father would come up with some very passive aggressive responses if he found out exactly what his son is doing, which is trying to open, with very little success, a boutique chocolate shop in the back streets of the old quarter of Marseille. Nobody cares, nobody is interested, and yet he is quixotic enough to want to do it.
I love all the. We have a few, very few. We used to have more small chocolate shops around us, and they were like the
Mhm.
place to go for chocolate. They were amazing, and they don't last long. We also had another small shop. There were a bunch of like cupcakeries.
Ah, yes.
Yes, and one of the ones we actually had them cater my wedding, but the cupcakes were so dense. You could have one and be like super full for the week. Like they were just oh, they were so good. But like in case anybody's thinking I'm going to give up being a lawyer and go be a chocolatier, go do it because I will eat your chocolate. I will keep you in business. It's fine. Uh, most in need of a long nap and a warm drink.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always the answer to this too. But I would say that this is Guy's partner in business, but also of the heart, who is a man called Mamed. He has left his family because they were not able to accept the fact that he was gay. He has a bit of a checkered past. He fell in with Guy at a time when he was possibly at his lowest. Um, and he is in the chocolate business now because he loves Guy and Guy loves chocolate. But he is constantly worrying about money, constantly worrying about where the money is going to come from, whether anybody is going to care about this very niche little shop in the middle of the back streets where no tourists go because the old quarter of Marseille is still quite seedy and undeveloped. Um, and he's extremely tense. He's always very tense. And he's got a heart of gold, really, but you never get to see it. And they live at the back of a Chinese takeaway run by a very nice family who speak very little French. And they are all terrified of him because he is big, because he is hulking, because he is basically rather unpleasant to them, because he doesn't like the fact that they are there taking up the space that they should have for their deliveries. Somebody needs to take him aside, give him a nice cup of hot tea, and just tell him that things are going to be okay, because they absolutely are.
Oh, poor buddy. The final one is most likely to have an enemies to lovers arc and not realize it.
Oh, well, this is a bit of a niche answer. But anybody who has read Chocolat will know that the main antagonist in Chocolat is a priest, because Vianne opens her chocolate shop right at the beginning of Lent in a tiny little village in the southwest of France, right opposite the church, and thinks that her timing is just fine and nobody will be upset about it. There ensues somewhat of a showdown here. And I wrote in Vianne a little tiny vignette where they meet. Um, they are not going to remember that they have met because it's such a passing episode that neither of them will have any memory of it 6 years later in Chocolat. But I wanted them to cross briefly. And I always felt that there was an attraction there that neither of them was able to follow through. Um, of course, 5 books down the line, who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, definitely Vianne and Renaud have got a chemistry.
Hmm.
I love that. Which brings us to the first set of questions. But I think, Katie, I think you already asked the first question that I had on the interview.
Super sorry.
It's okay. You can go ahead and take the rest.
um, all right. So you've spoken about the shared journey of motherhood between you and Vienne. How does Vienne reframe motherhood, not as something already known, but something uncertain, unfolding, and often full of grief as well as joy?
I think the thing about Vianne and motherhood is that she has a kind of fantasy of what it's supposed to be, but it's not something that she has experienced in any kind of normal way. For a start, she and her mother have never had a home. She has never
Hmm.
known who her father was. There is some question, in fact, of whether her mother is actually her biological mother or not. It's a relationship that she has claimed for herself and that Vianne has accepted because she had no choice. She's been very close to her mother, but there have also been times when she desperately wanted to get away from her. And she doesn't want this for her own child, but the only other experience of motherhood that she's had is through observation and through books. And so she has a kind of idealized version of what motherhood is to her, which is represented in the book by the statue of the Virgin Mary, which is at the top of the basilica in Marseille, which is the symbol of Marseille. It's a golden statue of the Virgin and Child. And it dominates the community, dominates her life. So she sees this as the ideal, but she has no idea how to reach it. And Margot, the wife of Louis, the bistro owner, is a woman who desperately wanted to be a mother but never was, who died, in fact, in childbirth. And so, although she has her voice to listen to in the cookbooks that she has left behind, um, she is not going to help her in that respect. So she has these two voices of older women in her mind. She has her mother, her own mother, and she also has Margot, and they are telling her completely different things about how to proceed, how to exist in the world, and how to make connections or not make connections, because her mother is constantly saying to her, you need to move on, this isn't safe, you can't put down roots here, it will stop you being free. And Margot is saying, it's okay, it's only lunch, it's not going to hurt anybody, and you can change hearts and minds this way.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Um, so you've said that Vianne completes a circle, but also opens a new path. After all this time, what made right now the moment to return to her? And what do you hope readers will find in this origin story that echoes through the books that follow it?
I think it's an interesting point to make. I have travelled with Vianne for all this time. Um, but in Chocolat, there were a lot of unanswered questions about who she was, where she came from, how she
Mm-hmm.
got involved in chocolate. And I deliberately haven't answered them. I think I left some areas unexplored on purpose because effectively when I wrote Chocolat, I thought I was writing a Western. I thought I was writing a story where the woman with no name blows into a little provincial town, picks a fight in with the man in the black hat and provokes a showdown. And I thought, well, stories like that don't need a backstory.
Mm.
Um, all they need is that potent narrative. But because I followed it through without having really consciously made the decision to write a sequel, um, I kind of followed her life and I became invested in the changes that she'd undergone and the relationships that she'd had. So when I wrote Chocolat, I was the mother of a young child, um, a 4 year old. So I wrote her as the mother of a 6 year old, and that was about right. And then with the lollipop shoes, I wrote her as the mother of a young adolescent because that's what I was. And then I wrote her as the mother of an older child, an older adolescent, and then the mother of a child who has left home. And the way you have to reassess your options, the unexpected grief that you feel at that separation. And so we are now more or less at the same stage in life. And I thought, sometimes you reach that stage and you realize that before you're able to move on, you have to look at where you came from. So I thought, okay, maybe this is the time where I look at where Vianne came from, to better understand her so that if I do carry on with her story, and I am likely to at some point, because honestly, she won't leave me alone, then I will know more about her. Not necessarily everything about her, but some of those questions will be answered.
I
So
think
do you, oh, sorry.
sorry, I think it's very true that characters don't leave us alone. That there are some
Mm-mm.
stories, especially for writers and other storytellers, that like I can't get this idea out of my head and I need to meditate on it and think about it and explore it in order to kind of satisfy that part of me that is just obsessively thinking about that. So it's nice to hear that that happens to everybody.
I think it does.
Yeah.
And I do have like a couple of other short questions. So do you think that this prequel of the Chocolat series will be like more of a series where we see her 6 years before, maybe 3 years before, maybe right before, or is this just a one and done prequel? Or you don't know? Who knows?
I never considered it that way at all. And yet, so many people have asked me this that I've started to see a possibility there. I don't know whether that's about me, because I have to wait for these things to percolate for a while before another
Mm-hmm.
idea comes to me. But there are a lot of potential avenues now to explore. I could continue with Vianne as she is in the present day. I could continue with the story that I left off with the end of Vianne. I could continue with either one of her daughters who have mostly untold stories to tell. So I have quite a number of options here. But so many people say, oh, we'd love to know what happened between the end of Vianne and the beginning of Chocolat. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, okay, well, there is a space there. It could be filled if I can get a story.
And I think that's such a great way to look at it because sometimes authors will just keep writing series like one after the other after the other after the other, and sometimes it's kind of like, okay, we've exhausted this, we've seen everything we've wanted to see, now you're just kind of going a little bit crazy. But with,
Mm,
I think with the way that you're doing it and with the way that some authors do it where they return to it after so many years and maybe put out another 2 to 3 books, because now we're like, okay, well, it's been long enough, we still want to know what happens.
mm,
I think that's such a great thing, especially when you don't put everything out there and start creating
mm.
this just to keep writing books, right?
Yeah.
You have a reason to write it.
Yeah, I think that's the reason I didn't want to write a sequel initially at all. And I told my publishers when Chocolat exploded, I'm not going to write that again. And there was some dismay. But I think what I really wanted to do was to prove to myself and to my readers that I wasn't just going to be a one trick pony and I wasn't just going to keep
Mm-hmm.
writing a book a year about these characters because there would be nothing new in that. I want always, when I write a book, to have something new. And if I don't have anything new and if I don't somehow challenge myself in some way, I ask myself whether it's worth writing the book at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so with this one, it was the challenge of finding a voice, um, building that character from the inside, and seeing if I could do that and make her come to life as an earlier iteration of herself. And to me, that was challenging. But I have to find another challenge now. All my books have been experimental on some level, and I just need to absorb whatever experience life throws at me and try and integrate it into the next thing that I work on.
Is there a style or a genre that you're kind of like itching to give a try then?
Um, I don't really think in terms of genre. I know my publishers do. I've written books that are marketed as fantasy and other things that are as mainstream literature and others that are marketed as crime. But the style that I use is still my style. It is still effectively my voice. And even when I'm writing as a first person narrator, it's still the tone and the scale of my range that I'm using, even though I'm doing another person's voice. So the style doesn't change, and the thematic content doesn't change either, because the things I'm interested in are still the things I'm interested in, whether I'm writing a story about Norse gods, or one set in a grammar school in the north of England, or one set in the south of France. So I just write the story that needs to be written at the time, and then the publisher will then slot it into a genre if they feel that it applies.
I suppose I mean more like a mode of writing. So you have the novels, novelettes, cookbooks, and the opera. Would you ever consider doing something? And forgive me if you have, like an epistolary novel or something
Ah,
that kind
I
of
see.
plays with like artifacts within the text, so that it's not straight prose and things like that.
Yes, I would love to do that. I mean, I've been, as you know, I've been experimenting with different storytelling media.
Hmm.
And so I've been doing illustrated books, and I've been doing audiobooks and reading my own audiobooks, which to me is a level above the printed page because the story likes to move into different delivery media. So, I'm all for the audiobook. And I've been taking things into theatre and obviously film and visual illustrations. I've even been making scent illustrations at one point for Vianne. I worked with a London company called 4160 Tuesdays, to do a scent illustration from a passage in the book, which I then read. And if it's a small audience, I will waft the scent into the audience at the time of reading so that they will get the illustration. And if not, I will just spritz their books at the end in the signing queue. No, I like doing that. I would love to try other things. I would love to do a graphic novel.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
I'd love to do a radio play.
Oh, that'd be
Um,
so fun.
all these
Mm-hmm.
things I would like to play with, because I just don't see why anybody would just stay in one lane,
Hmm.
given how volatile stories are and how nicely they do transfer to other media, and how everybody is slightly different in the way they experience storytelling. And some people don't particularly enjoy reading from the printed page, but they might enjoy another format. So yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that because in this day and age, if an author switches to a different genre, they might write under a separate pen name.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I should have
and
thought of that before. I've got a very dull name. I've given myself a kind of rollicking pen name like Samantha Wildheart or something. But unfortunately, I'm stuck with the name I've got now, and I'm not going to change it for anything else.
well, I'm just saying that you've done so much under your one name and still had success and a lot of readership and whatnot. Whereas I think a lot of people nowadays are so afraid to switch genres and
Mhm.
lose their audience, so they
Yeah,
switch pen names.
yeah, it's
What?
it's a risk always. It's always been a risk, and it's what I meant when I was talking about taking risks with each book. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been exceptionally lucky in that, although I do have readers who do sometimes limit themselves to one
Mm-hmm.
particular type of book, most of my readers follow me because they're interested in what I'm going to do next. not
Hmm.
necessarily expecting me to do the same thing. I mean, honestly, for the last 30 years, I've been doing such different things that by now I think people have probably got used to the fact that I'm not always easy to predict. But most of my readers are just genuinely curious as to where I'll go. And sometimes they write to me and they say, oh, well, I would never have read a fantasy novel, but I did read yours because it was you. Or they'll write and they'll go, yeah, I just didn't get that one, but never mind, I'm with you for the next one. And that's this is good. This is how I keep it alive.
Right.
I
And I,
sorry,
sorry.
I would like to say one thing about the pen names. I do know some authors that change their pen names depending on the age category that they're writing for,
Hmm.
because some write, adult smutty novels, but they also write children's fiction, and they don't want the
Hmm.
audience to kind of cross over and be like, oh, well, I like this author, and the kid is like 10 and should not be reading this other book about
Right.
much other things. So,
Yeah,
in
I
that sense,
completely get
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
But I'm also like, I just mean like in general, some people will write like horror, and then when
Hmm.
they go to write romance, it's a different like pen name. So it's yeah. So it's really nice that we see this, and as a writer, you can say, oh well, Joanne Harris does it under her name in all these different categories and medias, and it's just nice. It's just there for people who write. They can see that there is success,
Yeah,
without
yes,
switching
yeah.
pen names for everything.
Make
It
myself a
can
little
be done. I'm
bracelet.
not
What would
saying that
Joanne
it's
Harris
the
do?
easiest way to do it. I don't think it is the easiest way to do it, but it can work. And people, I don't really believe that writers should feel constrained to hide their identities just because they're writing in a
Hmm.
different genre. It seems to encourage this narrative within publishing that authors should always be doing the same thing, should be a brand, should be channeled into these narrow lanes where actually they may not feel comfortable there. Some people may do. Some people may feel happy being a brand. I mean, usually you get more money when you're a brand. So, there's that. But also, if you feel uncomfortable with that constraint, there should be wiggle room. There should be avenues of exploration there.
Yeah. I'm going to say, because we are at the 40-minute mark, that we're going to jump into game number 2, which is the first official game of the podcast. And this one is called Space 'em or Embrace 'em. So, Space 'em or Embrace 'em comes with a fun little story to it. You are traveling the cosmos with a a cargo full of tropes and cliches. Uh, and you are suddenly pulled into a black hole and you have to dump some of the cargo. But your screen is broken, you can only see two options at a time, and you can only dump one at a time. You have to get enough of these out so that you can get out of the black hole. I have a random number of these that you have to get down below. Do you have any questions?
Oh, I like this. I like this game very much. It's actually very like an episode of Blake's Seven, but you're all too young to remember that show.
I mean, you never know. I watch a lot of old stuff, but now I'm going to go look that up because I actually don't know. But I am. I'm going to do it. Yeah. Sold. So your first two options are The Chosen One and Found Family.
Hmm. Oh, I'm totally going to ditch The Chosen One.
Okay.
I'm very tired of The Chosen One, and I'm much happier when my chosen one turns out to be actually quite an ordinary person, and really probably not chosen at all. Because we've had a lot of chosen ones in the past, and I think it's probably time for the non-chosen to step forward.
I am I am equal parts over The Chosen One as I am the secret lost princess, because
Mm.
it's never a surprise. We read one book this season. I won't trash it by title, but we were so upset. We were like, "Oh, the lost princess! It's totally the main character." And then as it kept going on, we're like, "Ugh, it's the main character." It,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where you can't surprise me with it anymore.
No, you're right. It's very difficult to surprise unless you completely circumvent the normal usage of the trope and you properly satirize it and
Yeah,
you do something else with it, which is always possible, and you can always mess these things up a bit. But yeah, I could probably do without the chosen one for a bit.
big same. Your next two are the amnesia plotline and the brooding male lead.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, what was the question again?
Oh, so
No, it's okay. I think I'm going to ditch the brooding male lead, even though I'm quite into the brooding male lead from time to time. But I think we've had too much of the brooding male. I think I quite like the brooding female lead from time to time. That would be quite nice.
Mhm.
Um, I'd love to see Heathcliff rewritten as a girl.
Ooh.
See what that would see what that would do. Um, but anyway, yes, the idea that men are sort of typically brooding and that that makes them inherently attractive. Given that I am actually married to a brooding male, that I find it very annoying a lot of the time, that would probably be the trope that I would ditch.
Fair enough.
Sometimes I just want to give him noogies until he pukes when he's on. And I feel like that about Heathcliff too, much as I love them both.
I'm gonna use that as the title for the interview when I post it on our podcast
Cool.
feed. Noogies till he pukes. So your next two are the magical bakery and time travel fix it.
Seriously, I invented the magical bakery.
Mhm.
I'm allowed to ditch it if I want to.
Oh.
What I find is that after I wrote Chocolat, it was funny because Chocolat was, I was told that Chocolat would never sell because it wasn't commercial enough and there wasn't anything like it on the market. So they didn't even know what genre to put it in. And this idea of a witch with a chocolate shop, it was just they didn't know what it was. Was it fantasy? Was there a romance in there? No, not really. Okay, so what can we sell it as? And then 2, 3 years later, a whole imprint of books calling itself Chocolat was launched. It had nothing to do with me. And it was full of titles like The Cute Little Chocolate Shop on the Corner, or The Enchanting Bakery on the Street End, or you did this sort of thing. And I thought, what the hell is this? And so, yeah, I could probably, I feel that somewhere somebody probably owes me an explanation for these because it can't have been an accident. It just feels like I stepped in a puddle and don't know all these kind of similar stories just emerged from nowhere. So yeah, I'm totally going to ditch that one because we are over.
Okay. The next two are Deadly But Beautiful Fae and Secret Royal Heritage.
Oh, I can't possibly ditch the beautiful Fae. I mean, deadly and beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secret royal heritage, I can take or leave. I'm not really a great fan of royalty anyway. I'm not sure what advantage it gives them really, um, except the propensity to have 7 fingers or some sort of inherited
Or an enormous
inherited
chin.
problem. Yes, the severely receding chin. So yeah, I'm okay with blood being impure
Okay.
generally, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for the beautiful deadly
Okay.
Fae. I think I'm still kind of quite into those.
Okay. We have to keep
I
going because you are not below the number yet. But go on,
Okay.
Katie.
hold on 1 second. I just want to bring up how Joanne said she's so sick and tired of the magical bakery as she's promoting Vianne and
That's not the
the
magical bakery, right?
right,
She's
but
not
it's
there yet. She's
but
not there
she's
yet.
leading up to it.
Yeah, but
She's
I mean,
learning the chocolate business.
yeah, but I'm allowed to do this because
Yeah.
Yes.
if it's mine, I can ditch it.
Yeah. Also, she's I think Joanne's a little more intimately involved with the magical bakery plotline than you are I because she would have written it and edited it and she probably has it coming out of her eyeballs at this point. So I can see not wanting it on the cargo on the ship. It's fine.
Well, I quite liked the fact that Vianne couldn't cook at the beginning of Vianne and that she makes all these terrible mistakes and drops things on the floor and all her souffles are burnt. And this, she feels a lot more like me in that iteration than later when she actually can cook. And I never got to that point, of course. I still just mostly burn things.
I have a fun story about mostly burned things, but it came out really well. So I was making like russet potatoes the other night, and when I first took them out, they weren't completely cooked through, so we put them back in the oven, and then we forgot about them for like 3 hours. But they didn't burn. They actually came out like perfectly crispy, and whatever was in like the seasoning that I used, the seasoning mix, the extra crispy parts tasted like pancakes.
Mm.
I I don't know why, but they were magical potato pancakes and they were delicious, and I've been making them
Oh,
like every day this week because they were so
you'll
good.
never, never manage to make them again that way.
Nope, nope,
Guaranteed. But yes, absolutely. I love it when those things happen.
so good. So we have to keep going because you're not at the magical number yet. So your options are talking animals and found family.
Mm. I think I'm going to ditch talking animals, really. Even are they not allowed to talk at all? I mean, animals communicate pretty well anyway without having to talk in human language. So I think I'm totally good to have animals just basically vocalizing through whatever their natural language is. I think I've always had a bit of a problem with talking animals in books. I think ever since I read the Narnia books, which initially I disliked very much as a child because I felt that I was being manipulated somehow by somebody who had an agenda. And when I realized, aged about 8, who Aslan was supposed to be, that was just the moment at which I flung the book across the room, going, "No, they have fooled me all this time." So yes, I'm totally good with ditching Aslan and all his talking buddies.
Just a reminder that when you are writing for kids, you write for them and not at them because there's the
Absolutely.
attitude. Like they can tell every last time. So your next options are the amnesia plotline or time travel fix it.
I think the amnesia plotline is okay as long as it doesn't fix everything. I mean, sometimes it's very lazy to go, well, this character, we don't know who they are because they don't remember. I much prefer to have this character, we don't know who they are because they're refusing to tell us. This is much more fun. So I
Mhm.
think, even though time travel fix it is also quite annoying, I think I'm going to ditch the amnesia plotline because although having said this on reflection, I do love Zelazny's Amber series, which does start with an amnesia plotline, but that's Zelazny, and he is one of the first authors I ever met in my whole life, and I went to see a signing in Leeds by him, and I had my first copy of Nine Princes in Amber, and it was swollen like a telephone directory. And he looked at me as he signed it, and he said, "Honey, you've been reading this in the bath, haven't you?" And I said, "Oh, Dashy, yes, I have." My great moment of embarrassment before the great man. Um, but yes, I'm going to ditch his amnesia plotline.
Okay, you have officially escaped, and your cargo now has found family, time travel fix it, and deadly but beautiful Fae.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah,
That's okay because I can fall in love with the deadly but beautiful Fae, but if they bite me, I can fix it by using the time travel and then go and find my found family among the not quite as deadly but equally beautiful.
exactly. It works. And that brings us back to questions. So back to Katie.
Oh, all right. So this is your thoughts on writing and teaching the craft. Sorry, I was just about to do that. um, so you spent years as a teacher before becoming a full-time writer. If you could design a required reading list for new or aspiring writers, what 3 books, any genre, would absolutely be on it and why?
Okay, well, it's a difficult question because I actually don't think that writing can be taught in that way. I don't think that emulating anybody is a particularly great way to grow as a writer, although actually, pastiching people is how I got to find my voice. But I think we need a lot more than 3 books if we are going to realistically expect somebody to grow as a writer. So I would say read any 3 books that are as different from each other as they can possibly be. So let's choose a well written thriller. Let's take Donna Tartt's The Secret History because A, she can do dialogue like no other, and also she's extremely good at the unreliable narrator. Let us take also a graphic novel or a comic. Um, there are things that I would have suggested in the old days that I probably wouldn't suggest anymore. Um, okay, let's suggest a really strange one with hardly any dialogue called We Three, by I think it's by Robert Vaughan, or possibly another one called Pride of Baghdad, which is definitely by Robert Vaughan. both of them incredibly intense from the point of view of thinking about emotional response from the reader. Um, Very quick, exciting storylines, but also wrenchingly emotional. So if you want to see that the levels of emotion that a book can produce, this is a good one. And also, okay, let's go for something in a completely different style. Um, let's look at let's look at Lawrence Stern and Tristram Shandy, which stands alone in terms of genre. I don't think anybody has quite managed to decide what it is. It's long, plotless, bizarre, and yet has managed to stay alive and kindle a kind of excitement for what language and literature can do in people. But then go off and read hundreds of other books in any genre you like, as long as they're all different. Read nonfiction, read newspapers, read
Mm-hmm.
classics, read modern things, read things that are good, read things that are bad. Just read a lot, and this is a good start. In terms of teaching writing, I don't think there are some things that you can teach. You can teach nuts and bolts. You can teach shortcuts to things, but you cannot teach authenticity and feeling and voice. This is something you have to develop. This is about your personal growth, and there is no cookie cutter approach to this at all. So I am much happier to see an authentic voice than somebody who has studied a certain novelist until they can more or less do their voice, because what's the point? It's been done before.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great answer.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I think the more you read, the more you find your voice in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So for writers who are a bit further along, like maybe they have written a book or two already, what's one lesson you wish more of us writers learned after we've mastered the basics?
Um, I think that mastering the basics is a bit of a fallacious concept, um, because I'm not sure anybody actually consciously masters any part of that. I think you reach a certain point, but I don't think it's safe to assume that you are not going to improve. So I think everybody should be trying to push the boundaries all the time. Um, I think people should be looking at their comfort zone as writers and thinking, okay, how can I challenge that comfort zone? How can I do something that I haven't done before? I mean, I'm saying this, I'm projecting because it's what I always do, and it may not work for everybody. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a good idea to remember that we are all on a learning curve, and that there is no actual plateau to reach. There's always more. Um, I think it's a good idea to read in a conscious way. Once you've absorbed as much literature and nonfiction and other things as possible, it's a good ploy to start reading consciously and to think, okay, why has this scene moved me? Why am I invested in this character? How did the author do that? And I know that there's a certain level of conscious deconstruction going on there, but it's a good thing to do once you have achieved a certain level of good reading and a certain amount of confidence in your writing. You think, okay, how did this person do it? Um, because sometimes that can unlock things. It can unlock methods that you haven't known before, and that can help. But I would also say that throughout the whole process, you have to hang on to the joy that you feel when you write. If there isn't any, then it's going to be very difficult to provoke it in anybody else who reads the work. So don't get bogged down in the techniques and the deconstructions to such an extent that it robs you of the joy that you have in the experience, which is absolutely central, I think, to everything.
I would just like to add that that deconstructed way of looking at literature is how we have all of our talks here on the podcast. Where first we go, I can't believe it happened, and then we talk about how and why we felt that way. So come give Booked All Night a listen if you are not already subscribed. My shameless promotion. But also that actually works well to lead into the next question, which is about like the rules of writing. And what is your ultimate take? Are there actually any rules of craft that you personally break or think like, meh, I don't need to do that?
I think there are a number of common sense things that you can do which are likely to make your writing better. But no, there aren't any real rules.
Yeah.
It's not like physics. Um, you are effectively rebuilding the world from the ground up. And so you can invent your own physics and you can invent your own rules. I think the only one rule that really matters is the one that I call the so what test, which is the reader at the end of every page will go, so what? Why would I turn this page? You have to challenge them on that. You have to make them do it. However, you do that is up to you. And ultimately, if it works for you, then that was the right way to do it. It may not be the right way for somebody else to do it. And so you may have personal rules that you have tried, tested, and applied to yourself. They may be unique to you, and anybody else trying to use them may fail. So there's no universality here. There is a method and a process which you have to experiment with and find within yourself. But I'm very mistrustful of authors who go, never do this. Because, obviously, unless it involves, torturing puppies or something, which no, you should absolutely never do. Um, there is always a way of doing the thing that somebody else says you should never do, which will actually work and get the reader turning the page. So listen to the rules by all means. Feel free to ignore them when they don't apply to your process.
I love that. I love that because I love ignoring rules. But also, yeah, because I think we get bogged down in them. Like my degrees later on, they're all writing. My bachelor's and both of my master's degrees are in writing, and we talk about the rules and the constrictions of genre. And when I was in my MFA program, those of us that wrote genre fiction, so anybody writing sci-fi or fantasy and things, a lot of people in class would kind of give us the, well, can you do that? I'm like, I can do it because I made that. Like, these are my rules,
Yeah.
like I if I want the chair to float in the middle of the classroom, I can do that because I said so, because that's how gravity works. I've just decided, and that's like that's how it works. But they would get caught up in rules, and I remember one of our workshops was just pitching ideas, and one of the co-hosts here, Maggie, who couldn't join us today, they had pitched a fantasy where there is a magical wall of fire and it was spreading across the island, and then the main character gets absorbed by it and it ends up being a portal fantasy. And everybody in class was like, well, why don't they just go around the wall of fire? It's like, well, you can't. She's on an island, she can't get off of it. Well, no, but the fire, like, they could just like throw water on it. No, it's a magical fire and you can't. And so there are just some people that get so caught up in the rules and how things are supposed to work in the here and now that they can't kind of explore other options. But that works for some genres. Like if you're in contemporary and there's a fire, you could absolutely just throw water on it. Unless
Yes.
it's like an oil fire, in which case do not throw water on
Don't throw water on the oil.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of setting out the rules of your world, I think.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think that you need to do this to an extraordinary degree, but you do have to create the conditions for your reader to suspend disbelief. And if you
Mhm.
don't, and if they don't suspend it sufficiently, then you're going to lose them along the way. And I think that's all it is really. It's about how invested are you going to get your readers, and how are you going to facilitate that investment, particularly if you are talking about a fantasy world where a number of differences need to be more or less taken for granted.
Yeah.
How are you going to do this? And it's an interesting one because some people do it by having very carefully delineated world building, where they explain all of it, including how the drains work in the city, the way Terry Pratchett wanted to, and all the rest of it, which is fine, and that works beautifully. But you also have other authors approaching it in a more organic way. And sometimes you have people using the juxtaposition method that I mean, Stephen King does this all the time.
Mhm.
Every time Stephen King writes a supernatural or a fantasy novel, every time he does something that's properly in the world of supernatural or fantasy, he counterbalances it by something which is universal and physical, which is why all his characters are constantly eating, drinking, farting, belching, and doing various things which are so human and so universal that they take the sting out of the other stuff that you're expected to buy into. And it's one of the things that he does just read anything by Stephen King and count the pages until somebody farts. I'll tell you, it's not going to be long.
Well, now I have homework. I'm gonna go count farts in Stephen King's novels.
And belches. Belches he likes too.
Belches and farts. I will get back to you. Now I'm curious. How many belches and farts? I uh when I was an undergrad, one of my assignments was to count and explain the many light and dark references in Beowulf.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what you want to do over the weekend is count all 200 plus of those. And now I'm going to redo the assignment, but it's going to be farts and belches from Stephen King.
Well, there's a fair bit of physicality in Beowulf as well.
Yes.
And it serves the same purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The reminder of human physicality in a world of the supernatural is a really important way of rooting it into a kind of realism.
I think also, even with that, like, you still want to be wary of it because you can get into the Hercules issue of it where in the 90s, everybody remembers the 90s, there was the TV show Hercules with Kevin Sorbo, and almost every episode, Hercules got beat by somebody. And it was specifically to prove that this person was stronger than Hercules for a moment, but Hercules is supposed to be the strongest person, so how could they possibly? And, you know, it happens once in a while. You can be like, oh no, they're really strong. But it happens every episode. Then you start to be like, okay, well, are they actually the strongest person? Or and so it's just kind of like a grain of salt thing. Like we can have this juxtaposition and we can have this I was going to say side by side comparison, but that's just juxtaposition. So you can have them there side by side, but don't do it too often because then you're kind of digging it into the ground and it's no longer serving its purpose. But that's kind of true of any element of craft. You can't just be like, I'm going to foreshadow everything 2 sentences before it happens, because then it's not going to have the same oomph, you know?
Indeed.
Excuse me, I'm going to ignore that rule.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I foresee that you're going to ignore that rule
of writing.
Yeah. I foresee that you are going to ignore that rule of writing and compare something to James Cameron's The Titanic.
In every
book discussion, every single one. But that brings us to the third game, which is Would You Rather, Author Edition. So, if you've ever played Would You Rather, it's very standard. I'm just going to say Would You Rather X or Y, and you explain. So the first one is, would you rather be trapped in your own novel for a week with no powers, or write a 7-book series where every title must contain a pun?
Oh, I would much rather be trapped in my own novel, even the worst of my novels, than write any kind of 7-book series. I hardly know what I'm going to be writing tomorrow, let alone in 7 years' time.
Would you rather your characters write fan fiction about you, or readers treat you as a cryptid who might not exist?
I think readers already treat me that way, so that's fine. But I mean, I would love to see what my characters write about me anyway, because, you know, who wouldn't love to see fan fiction written by the villain of their story, for instance? I would love to have that.
Oh God, I can't imagine what my villains would write about me. They'd be like, and then this bitch. Would you rather never write endings again, or only write endings forever?
Interesting question. I think I would never write endings again because arguably hardly any of my books really do have endings. Given that I'm always picking up the threads later anyhow, I think this is pretty much my MO.
You're like, haha, I write pauses, and then they last for like 20 years, and then I get back to it. It's fine.
Long ellipses, yes.
Yes, it's fine. Would you rather every book you publish gets adapted, but only into musicals or only into video games?
Interesting, because I would love to do both. But given how much I love musicals, I think, you know, I could probably eschew video games that I don't play terribly often. and go for as long as they were, as long as I could control the writing of the musical, and as long as they weren't all just basically Cameron Mackintosh productions, then I would love to try various different kinds of musical theatre.
They'd be fun. I think Chocolat would actually make a really great cozy video game. You just run your own little chocolate shop and piss off the priest
Absolutely,
in town.
that would be quite good. Yes, just avoid the priest and give chocolates out to anybody who wants them. That would be quite
Yes. Would you rather have your most obscure short story go viral or have your most famous book misquoted forever?
fun. Both of those things have already happened. Um, my book is Chocolat is always being misquoted from lines from the movie. I now live with this, and I think to myself, did I actually write that line? Oh no, it was in the movie. But it's constantly attributed to me, which is just fine. But I feel bad for the writer of the script. Um, yes, and also one of my very obscure short stories was, unbeknown to me, put on one of the examination papers for the GCSE, which is basically the 16-year-old exam. It was given out of context, and everybody thought that it was about a paedophile, whereas in fact it really wasn't. And I got thousands of angry 15 and 16-year-olds on social media going, was he a paedophile, miss? Was he? What? And so I had to answer all these and go, you know what? You really ought to read the story and then you'll know. So both of those things have happened. Um, Honestly, if I could go back in time and remove one of them, I don't think I would. It's just part of the rich tapestry of being an author.
Well, then. That's actually really funny that they both happened.
Yeah, well, you work long enough in this business, and everything goes by, everything happens.
I love it. Would you rather be able to write a perfect first draft in one sitting, but only once a year, or always write quickly, but only in haiku?
Good God, the concept of writing a first draft perfectly, I think, is just, I just don't believe that it could happen. I mean, I could wish for it, and once a year is just fine, because you're supposed to deliver a book a year if you're lucky, and if it's a perfect draft, then no problem. I could do it, and I could spend the rest of the year just doing what I liked. As for the haiku, I don't think I would be able to do that. I'm going to have to jettison that as a possibility, because that is one genre that I'm quite incapable of writing in. For a start, I don't know Japanese, and I don't think that haiku in English really serve the purpose. I
It
think that
does not.
it's a sort of zombie genre that really doesn't have the emotional resonance of the original language, and nor should it, because you know poetry in English has its own different algorithms. So yes, I would definitely happily jettison that possibility.
Okay. Would you rather teach a class on magical realism and chocolate, or trickster gods and the existential crisis?
Oh, Tricks, Gods, and the Existential Crisis would be much more fun. Um, I think it's one of the reasons I wrote my Loki books and my Rune books was that I wanted to give a different voice to the trickster, and the whole existential anguish of the first part of the 20th century is, I think, what created the superhero genre in the first place. And I wanted to subvert all that and bring it back to a human voice, a quite bratty human voice. So yes, I would have lots of fun doing that.
Sounds like a fun course. You should teach it online so I can attend.
I will also attend.
Would you rather receive a glowing blurb from a literary legend who admits they didn't finish the book, or a 3-star review that includes a fan poem?
Oh, I think the fan poem, really. I mean, I rather mistrust reviews. And much as I would love to have some great legend of literature on the front of my book, I'm not sure whether blurbs by celebrities really help anymore. I think so many of them are kind of extorted with various threats from publishers, and and I'm not sure anybody really finishes the books anymore. I don't think people have time. Some of them give so many endorsements that I wonder if they get time to read anything. But yeah, I'm always a bit of a sucker for a fan poem or a piece of fan art, and lots of people send me these things, and I'm always delighted to see them.
Lovely. And the last one is, would you rather get stuck in a time loop of your very first book tour or have to do live readings of every one-star review you've ever received?
Oh, I would love to do one-star readings of every review, as long as I could do them in the voices. I have a whole series of voices that I use for my audiobooks, so that would actually be quite fun. I could do a whole reel of the one-star reviews. My favorite one-star review that I've seen recently, I think, I don't remember where it was now, but it was someone complaining about Vianne, saying that she just couldn't understand how 21-year-old Vianne could be around all these old men and you know, they'd never harassed her, they'd never sexually harassed her. So this reader actually wanted more sexual harassment in my book, which actually doesn't contain any sexual harassment, and felt that that would be a selling point. And I mean, I think it's just wonderfully illustrative of what people read in books, the importance that they give to certain things in books, and how none of us really know anything at all, and how these books that we create are just amazing Rorschach tests for readers to take from exactly what they need. And
Yeah.
I do apologize to that person that I didn't give them what they needed in this case, but you know what? Maybe you'll get it somewhere else. Not in one of mine, though.
How dare your books not have sexual harassment?
Mm. That's exactly what we need in this day and age. More
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
harassment.
What a great segue back
Who
to
knew?
questions. How dare you not have sexual harassment?
Who knew that would be a problem? Hmm?
Yeah. So the final round of questions are all silly, unhinged things, kind of sleepover worthy. Everybody got the sleepy ha-has, things put together. Katie, go right ahead.
All right. Which of your characters would win the Great British Bake Off, and which one would start a rivalry that spirals into full on magical sabotage?
Well, I don't think Vianne would try for the Bake Off because I don't think she would want that kind of visibility. But she might be able to persuade Louis, particularly Louis at the end of the book, the owner of the bistro. She might persuade him to enter. As for magical rivalry, the only real magical rival I have ever really written for Vianne is a woman who turns up in the lollipop shoes. Her name is Zosie de l'Alba, and she is beautiful and deadly, like my fey fantasy there. And she would be totally great at the magical sabotage part of it. Not because she's a great cook, but just because she hates to see other people succeed.
If Vianne were a scented candle, what would its top, middle, and base notes be?
Well, if she were a scented candle, she would probably have the scent of the scent that I created for the scene in Vianne. So the base would be um, wet earth, wet pavements, um, with some patchouli to give it some character. Then there would be some geranium and tomato leaf in the center, and the top end would have a bit of rose and also a small amount of dark chocolate. And
Ooh.
that's it would be slightly churchy, slightly chocolatey, and not an entirely clean scent either. A scent of old quarter of Marseille in the rain.
That middle scent reminds me of my neighborhood as a kid. I grew up in an immigrant neighborhood. There's lots of Polish and Italian families, and on Sundays, the Italian families made their sauce, made their gravy, and so the entire town smelled like tomatoes and
Wow,
garlic and basil, and it's like, ah. And I miss that because those families aren't here anymore, which is very sad. But yeah,
sounds wonderful.
I would make the middle of that candle last as long as humanly possible.
The first one, the wet pavement, reminds me of the petrichor candle that started a fire
Uh,
Oh,
in that book.
yeah. One of the books that we read was Death at Morning House by Maureen Johnson, and in the very beginning, the main character sets a house on fire accidentally, trying to have a very like cutesy date, uh, and the candle is the petrichor candle, and she goes into great detail. She's like, it smelled so wonderful, and then it lit the curtains on fire, and we didn't
oh
notice.
dear.
So,
Yes, yes. Don't do this at home, children.
yes, yes, please don't light your house on fire with candles. A public service announcement from Booked All Night and Joanne Harris.
All right, so you're trapped in a cottage in the French countryside with Loki, Vianne, and a mysterious talking squirrel. Who survives and who starts a band?
Oh, well, the squirrel dies straight away because Loki hates squirrels.
He
Um,
does.
so, that's that. I might be able to tempt him to leave me alive. But as for starting the band, that would have to be me, because I have no indication that Loki plays an instrument, but he does detest lutes and also has a bit of a thing going against Braggy, who is a musician. So I would think that I would have to be the one who started band. I mean, I could possibly get him to play drums um, at a pinch, but yeah, he's probably got the rhythm right. So that would probably be how it would work out, ideally.
Now I just have a visual in my head of this band. Uh, what is your least useful superpower as a writer? Something absolutely ridiculous that only you seem to be able to do.
Excessive sweating.
You had that one locked and ready. You're like, I know exactly which one it is.
No, I think my least useful superpower as a writer is actually it's not really a superpower at all. It's something that I have to do. I think it's a form of disorder really, but I have to read everything aloud. It slows everything down, but it is extremely good in terms of editorial tools.
Mm,
So this is why I have to be in my shed or alone when I'm working, because everything gets read aloud over and over and over again until the rhythm and the algorithm of the phrase is exactly the way I want it. I am absolutely convinced that nobody else notices the result of this, which is why it's a completely useless superpower, but it's also something that I always do.
love it.
Oh, it's me. I'm sorry. Um, would you rather fight a giant sentient truffle or a mob of enchanted spoons?
Is it a chocolate truffle or is it a fungal truffle?
Ooh, your choice.
Because if it was a chocolate truffle, I would just light the magical fire underneath it and it would just melt away and that would be fine. The spoons would be more of a problem. Are they large spoons or are they small ones?
It's a mob of them. I imagine that it would be like a
A
mob of
mix.
small. Yeah.
Definitely, I'm going for the truffle then because I know its weak point. I have no idea how to destroy a spoon.
I would say fight the mob of enchanted spoons, and then you have spoons to share the giant sentient truffle because you can defeat it with the spoons.
That would be true, but I've never fancied eating anything that was still alive. And if it's sentient, then it will probably be talking to me all the time, going, please don't eat
Oh,
me.
yeah. I don't want chocolate screaming at me as I eat it.
That would be
That's a good
horrible,
point.
right?
Yeah.
No, I'm
Hmm.
I'm going with melting the truffle, and then maybe I could use the spoons to spoon it up later when it was nicely not sentient anymore.
Okay. That's what we'll go with. So, our final question, and we ask this of every guest that comes on, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to today or thank today? Anybody from agents to editors to writing friends and anybody else in between?
Oh, I would love to give a shout out to my Zoom group, which is a group of sci-fi and fantasy writers called Zero Room, and they get together regularly and have Zoom meetings. Many of these I don't go to, but I'm aware that they happen, and we also have conversations online and we share our news. And it's a great community, and I don't take part in it all the time, but I'm very aware of it and very grateful that it exists.
That's lovely. That is also a wrap for today. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everybody at home who is watching the live, and thank you for everybody in the future who will be listening to this once I get it all edited in together. Please keep an eye out in October for the start of the Final Chapter Games, a series in which authors will return to compete against each other and podcasters for an actual trophy and not just a JPEG that I send out in an email. The games will begin October 28th. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.